Hello and g'day! In today's video we're making envelopes and tags. And we're going to be using the glassine paper that we made in video part 1 and part 2. I also want to show you a couple of other ideas as well, and the fors and against, and what I discovered while using this faux glassine paper. We'll start off with the easy one, making a glassine envelope using the plain white napkin that I made in part 1. I have a pattern available for sale in my online shop if you want to make these yourself. You can make these using any paper. It doesn't have to be this DIY glassine paper here. I've also been asked a question by Lynn Williams. Her comment, gorgeous. I was wondering if the wax treated pieces leave any residue behind on, say, a journal or an envelope. Thank you for the inspiration. Good question, Lynn, and it got me thinking. You're right. What if we had a journal, and in that journal we had this envelope, and in this envelope we had a DIY piece of paper with the candle wax on it, and that was in the envelope. And we decided that we made this collage and waxed it with the candle wax, and we're going to glue that on here. So I'll quickly glue that on here and I'll be back in a minute. Right, now that's giving me 2 sandwich pieces of this wax paper. I've got my tag in there, so we leave that hanging out there, and I've got a wax piece on there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh this down. I'm going to put some other papers on it, and what I'm trying to do is simulate a journal. And I'm going to put this in the oven, and I'm going to leave it in there for half an hour maybe. I'm going to test it to see whether or not this wax transfers onto here, and whether or not this wax melts and sticks inside the envelope here. So I want to know whether I can pull it out. And then I'll come back and I'll let you know what this test does. To make the little envelope, all you need to do is print out the template. I'm using a 200 GSM. I just cut out my small envelope. You can cut them both out at the same time, so you end up with your little pattern all cut out. We'll make this one up first. Well, I don't need to make this bigger one up because it's identical, only it's just that little bit bigger. So we'll use this piece of tissue paper here that's been waxed, and it's got a little bit of distress ink on it for colour. So we'll just figure out where we want to put the pattern and put it on there. I found the best way to trace around this is with the ballpoint stylus pen. It's not even a pen, it's just got a little ball at the end of it. So just use that, and that will just leave a mark on the paper. Because it's been waxed, it will virtually bruise it. If you haven't got one of these, just find something similar, because if you use anything sharp, it will rip the paper. This paper is quite fine. Right, so you'll end up with an outline like that. Once you've got your outline, just cut it out. You can cut right on the line if you want, or you can cut the line away. It is an odd paper to cut. It is very fine. It has its fors and against. One of the against is that it is quite fine. If you go like a bull at a gate and cut this way too fast, you will rip it. The tissue paper that I've used here is actually the backing off some of the coloured papers, and it is the finest. Therefore, when you go to use it like this, it will rip the easiest. See how easy it is to tear? Once you work out which side you want as your outside, just fold these little pieces over. That will be the inside. These are the side tabs, and we're going to use those to glue the envelope together. Just fold them level with the whole side here. To come across the bottom, I just put my ruler on there, lift that up, and use my thumb and just put a crease there. Once you crease this, you can't crease it further down or further up because it will put a permanent line there, right? You're stuck with it. So then you fold that over and that's where it stays. That is the same as any other glassine. It is pretty much a permanent mark. So you don't need to crease it too hard because it's very light paper. Then I just open it back up again. I'm using the Barely Art glue. It's the glue that dries clear. If you get this glue, make sure you get the one that dries clear. It's got a very fine tip on it, which allows me to put a very small amount of glue on this envelope, right? Which virtually is this area here, because if you glue all the way up to the end, you're going to have a bit of a mess up here. Right, so you put a little bit there and stop. Turn it around so you can see it better. A little bit there and stop. That is all you need. All right, then we'll just pick it up and I'm going to squash it gently with my fingers. If you go too crazy here, you will skew off your paper and it will start to rip. Right? If you've got one of the, if you can, get yourself one of these little scrapers from Scan and Cut. Even if you haven't got a Scan and Cut, these are brilliant. And just flatten that glue. See how that disappeared? It will when it dries. It'll be like this. And flatten it. If you don't have one of these, just grab your bone folder and do the same. It's sort of gently. You don't have to push too hard. You're just flattening it out. You can use your bone folder or this little scraper and just crease that there and you've got yourself a little glassine envelope. This one here is the recycled napkin. This one here is the white backing napkin with some distress ink on it. And this one here is the white backing napkin with the colour transfer technique. You make these envelopes exactly the same way. And they're perfect for putting little goodies in. Right, now to make these two up, you've got to remember the difference between the two. So I'll push this one aside and we're making D. Right, D has this long flap at the front. So the way we start with this one is we know that that's going to come up over the front. So we want our sides to come over first. So I'm just going to give that a very light crease and fold it in. Same with the other side. This piece here needs to be at the bottom because that's your flap that comes over the front. So then we're going to use our ruler again as a guide and crease that. You can use your finger this time because it's much bigger. And we're getting that centered and folded down to be at the front. The glue area is here. So if you turn that around that way, the pattern will show that we're gluing this over this. If you put the glue on here, you're going to make a mess of it because your glue will be up here where it's not needed. So make sure you glue only here. You don't need a lot. going to back it off this time just to show you how little amount of this glue that you need. You can spread it with your finger first. You can see it spreading out, and you can use this little scraper to use it like a bit of a rubber and or a squeegee, and just flatten it down. Spread it out and then just let it dry. Don't try and use these straight away. You've got to let that dry. Then we'll come back to this, putting the ruler at the top of these side flaps, square across and folding that down. That's how easy they are to make. Let that dry and it's ready to use. The next one is just a tiny bit different because these wider flaps are going to come into the center and they're going to be joined here. Let me see if you can see this better. Yeah, they're going to be joined here. So we'll start off by doing that first. We'll crease our folds. And once you've folded it, you can then decide which one goes over the top and the bottom. So you only need around about that much, even top and bottom. It's not a big overlap. This time, same again, I'm going to not go anywhere near the end with my glue, here and here, and go in between. Only need a little bit. And squish it down. I'm patting it first because this glassine paper wants to move. I don't want any of the glue to come inside the envelope. So if it starts to do that, come back this way and pull it back here. Another thing you can do is pop something in there that's not going to allow that to stick down. And you make sure that it's free. The longer flap is the top and the shorter flap is the bottom. So we'll just fold the bottom over and glue it in place. Keep away from the edges, straight down the center. Spreading with your fingers first and then flattening with either your bone folder or your scraper. Fold down the top flap and you are finished. They're perfect for just sitting something nice and simple in there. That's a sticker. You can go crazy and use all different styles of your glassine paper in all the colours. This one's the pattern. It looks really good because you can't see the join between those two. I've got a plain tag and I use the colour transfer technique that I showed you in part 2. You can just have your tag without the colour technique, so it can be just plain. All you need to do then is pick out your favourite glassine napkin and work out where you're going to put it. What happens is you can see the different colours behind it. All right, so that's what I like about it. And then the back has got something matching. I'll show you what it would look like if it wasn't. So there it is, plain. The colours definitely pop. They're nice and bright. But on this one, you get that more grungy look that we love in our junk journals. So I'll bring it down here a bit further so we get more of this pattern showing up here. So I'm going to glue it all over. All right, so I've glued the edge first. I'm going to work out where I want it, and then I'm going to put some glue behind this big red flower. And that's so that it doesn't show. So I'm working out where it's going to go. So I know that's going to go there. I can put some behind this blue flower. Same as any see-through material that you're going to be using for your journaling down there. So now I'm just going to pop that on. I'm going to put it right on the edge so I don't have to cut that one side. And glue that down. Oh, I forgot to put some around here. Put some around your hole reinforcer, and that just makes it stick to that a bit better as well. I would normally work a bit quicker than that because my glue on the edge has started to dry. I normally would not let that happen because I want to squash it down nice and flat. So I'll just keep going and squash it down anyway. And just use your fingers to go around your whole reinforcer because you don't want to rip that. So that's down and you can barely see the glue. And that's using the Barely Art glue. And I'm going to cut that away. I freehand, but feel free to use a ruler if you want to. Now all that's left to do is punch a hole. Now a tip, if your inside of your cut is a little bit furry there, just get any sort of blunt pokey tool and just run it around there like that. And that'll burnish those inside cut for you. And let's finish this tag up. Okay, so we've got our string in now. This one here I'll put a hole reinforcer over the top. This one here I have not, and this one here I have not. It is entirely up to you whether or not you do that. What I've done on this one was I done my colour transfer first on the blank tag. Then I got my glassine napkin and I put that there. It was ripped down here. You can just barely see that rip there. So I thought, well, okay, it doesn't fit on the tag, but I'm going to use the rip. So I distress inked the edges, which took a little bit of doing, but I still got it to take on the edge there. Then I put some glue around the outside, not in the center, a little bit of glue behind the bird, just like I did on that one there. And then I glued that down. It was sitting free in the middle here. There's no glue behind that bit there, which gives it a bit of a 3D look. Then, when I was doing my next lot of pressing and putting wax in my napkin, I then give a very light hit with the iron here and here. And you can see what's happened. It melted the wax in some areas. I didn't go over the whole lot. So I just got a little bit and it gave me another look altogether. And that's why that bit there is a bit free and that bit there is laying flat. That bit there is free and that bit there is torn, and it's just giving me a whole lot more interest rather than a one sheet full piece of napkin. Yet they're both one piece of napkin. It's just that this one's ripped and partially glued down and this one's glued down all the way. Now I'm going to make a journaling card. This was the card that I used the colour transfer technique on. Check out video part 2 if you haven't seen this. I'm just going to work out what I want on the front of my card. So I've got my collage pieces here and I can just pick what I want to use. Now just say if I pick that part there, I'm going to take that bit off and that bit off. I can use it somewhere else. This piece here, I'd rather use that in a journaling page. This one here, it fits perfectly and it's got a lot of area where I can see through and see the colour transfer underneath. That would look really good on that. And this one here would also look good on there. I could use that towards the center or I could turn it around and use it on an angle. Any of these would look okay. But I'm going to use this one and then I'm going to turn the inside of it into a journaling card. So we'll just work out where I want that. So I don't want to lose any of this at the bottom, and I shouldn't lose too much of that top. So I'll work out where I want it. I'm going to rip that off there, and I'm going to rip it off here. When you place this, after you've ripped it, you can have some torn on your card and some over the edge, and once I've glued that down, I'll cut that off, and that'll add more interest. So you've got some torn and some straight. So we'll put some distress ink over that white bit because I don't really want it to be overly white. I'm not going to load it up with a real lot, just a little. And see there, where now it looks a lot better than just the straight out white. Glue behind some of these letters where I don't want the glue to show. Some of these bigger letters, even better. I'm working pretty quickly now because I feel my glue is going to dry on me. I'm going to come back in with my scraper and spread it out even more. There's only so much you can do with your fingers. And it's working perfectly. Now I'll come back in where I know I've put a bit of glue behind the leaves and flatten them down, and behind the writing and across the top and the side. And it's pretty much all disappeared. Guys, if you haven't got any of this Barely Art glue, get yourself some. I've got the link below in the description. So I'm totally going to let that dry before I cut any of these edges. I've got some really old craft paper here. It's quite light, like I'd say it's about 80 or 90 GSM. I've had this since the 90s. I've got a big roll of it. I just tore a piece that's going to fit inside my journaling card. I individually stamped my lines on, put a decorative stamp there, and I'm just going to glue this in place. You don't want to cover up too much of something that you like. If you really don't like it, well, then you would go ahead and cover up this side as well. Pop it into place. I'll see if I can cut it off now, if it's dry enough. That is a pretty neat journaling card. Now I'd like to talk to you about the fors and againsts. What I found was good about this technique and what I found that was not good about this technique. The fors, it works great. It's transparent. It makes the colours nice and rich. They look fantastic. The Barely Art glue, when I use that behind the glassine paper, it disappears. You can create matching pieces. That is the non-waxed napkin decoupage to a dictionary page, and that is the waxed napkin glued onto a tag. Now for the against. What I find against this technique is it's very fragile. If you're trying to cut it out, you can accidentally nick into the paper because it's so fine. It is fiddly to cut, and it does tear very easy. Once you fold it, it's permanent. Say, if you put a fold line there and you change your mind, you're going to have that mark there permanently. You can't change your mind. Say if you fold it in the wrong place and you need to fold it down there, you're going to have that first fold line there permanently. So you need to make sure that if you're making an envelope that you fold it in the right place, because if you changed your mind and you wanted it folded there, you're going to have that fold line stay there forever. If you want to distress ink the edges, you can't. It just falls away from you. You can try and get some ink onto it, but as soon as it starts folding up, and then it will bruise and leave all these white marks. So you can see it's not easy to distress ink. If you want to use them marks for you at your advantage, you can colour them with this distress ink just by sponging it on like that, pushing it down into the white area and turning that into a bit of a grunge technique. Now, I think you'll agree with me here that probably the biggest against is going to be this one. To best explain it, I'm going to show you what I've done just in another short clip. I'll put that here now. What if we had a journal, and in that journal we had this envelope, and in this envelope we had a DIY piece of paper with the candle wax on it, and that was in the envelope. This is a tea-dyed piece of paper, and that was in here, and that was sewn into the journal. And we decided that we made this collage and waxed it with the candle wax, and we're going to glue that on here. So we leave that hanging out there, and I've got a wax piece on there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh this down. I'm going to put some other papers on it. I'm going to put just a faux printed tea-dyed paper, and I've got another piece of parchment paper here. And what I'm trying to do is simulate a journal. Now I'm also going to put it inside another book, and I'm going to put this in the oven. And I'm going to leave it in there for half an hour maybe. I'm going to test it to see whether or not this wax transfers onto here, and whether or not this wax melts and sticks inside the envelope here. So I want to know whether I can pull it out. And then I'll come back and I'll let you know what this test does. I left this in the oven for 1 hour. I thought half an hour might not be enough. So let's have a look. It's warm. It's as if I left it in a car. You know how things are nice and toasty on a hot day in a car? The pages are all warm all the way through. And there we go. We have wax transfer. It has come through. And it's come through heaps. It's come through 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, there. So that is really warm right there. I had that on the lowest setting I could find on my oven, but that is really warm to the touch. I feel that is quite comfy warm. It's not hot that I have to pull my hand away. And there is the tag. So there's the answer, Lynn, to your question. It will leave a residue behind, but mind you, I forced this to happen. I put this in the oven. It's a confined space. It was more warm than normal, and it simulated a hot car. If you had a journal that you carried around with you and you left this in your car and you used this technique, you'd ruin your book, without a doubt. You would not use this in a book that you carried around. But if you had this book in your home, I don't know, I think you would be safe. because my house does not get this hot. I've never picked up a book ever in my life and felt it warm like this, ever. So I think you'd be safe if you left your book in your house, but you would not be safe if you carried it around in your handbag or left it in the car. You decide whether or not you want to use this method in your journals or not. So there you go. That is why you would be careful using this technique. Why you would use it and why you wouldn't use it. But know this, the test that I just done using the oven is not something that you would put your book through. You would not leave your book normally in the car. But what if you did? What if you used this technique? What if you made this and you went to all the trouble and you put it in here and you put it in a pocket somewhere and you accidentally left this in your handbag and left it in the car? It can happen. You're not always going to remember that you've got a wax tag sitting in a journal somewhere in your car. If you go on holiday, you don't want to be bothered about that sort of thing. So this technique may not be any good for you if you're using it for a traveler's journal or a shopping journal or something that you carry about with you. I'm going to test it inside the house in a warm area and see whether I get an extreme transfer like this. That was a very large area on this envelope. So I'm going to do it in a more natural environment and I'll give you some feedback later on. So I think that was a very interesting question. Thanks, Lynn. And it is definitely something that you need to take into consideration when you're doing this technique and putting it into a book. If you did put this into a journal and you sold it or gave it to someone, you would have to be careful because sending it through the post, it could melt and transfer. If you gave it to someone for a gift, you would have to let them know that it could melt and transfer. Nevertheless, it is a fun technique to do. Whether or not you choose to use it is entirely up to you. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching and bye for now.